Now play it one more time. Depression. How can you feel depressed if you have sound voices in your head? People say, I have trouble motivating myself. And I find out the inside of their head is as boring can be. But if you play things like this inside your head, how in the world could you have trouble getting motivated? Say, it's like people like insomniacs. Insomniacs are really cool people. They sit in bed and talk to themselves about how they're going to have trouble sleeping and how they'll never be able to get to sleep. And you know what's interesting is you could take the same people and I say the same stuff to yourself. Say, well, I'm never going to be able to get to sleep. I'm going to be late for work. I'll be tired all day tomorrow. I'm never going to be able to sleep. Only just slow down the tempo. Lower the tone of your voice. Go, I'm never going to be able to get to sleep. And then lower your tone down. Say, probably I'll be late tomorrow. Throw in a few yawns. Say, I'll never be able to get to sleep. I always have trouble sleeping. And the more I could try to... My insomniacs always fall asleep. Even while I'm talking to them in the office, they're out cold. But see, psychiatrists don't ask people the right questions. They say, well, why are you having trouble sleeping? And who gives a shit? They're not sleeping, so teach them how it's done. I get on an airplane, they start the engines, and I go, because I have never found anything that interesting to do on an airplane. And I certainly am not that interested in the cuisine. I got food poisoning from Continental Airlines. I got to do a seminar in Arizona. I got a stage. I flew into Phoenix. I took a cab out to Scottsdale. 30 minutes later, I'm on a stage. 35 minutes later, I begin to vomit onto the audience. I said, here's a new technique. Passed out. They took me to the emergency ward. And I had the weirdest experience. I felt like I knew everyone that was there. But I didn't know them. But everybody looked totally familiar. And everybody sort of looked the same. We were all like this. But everybody I looked at, I thought I knew them. And I thought, God, this is so fucking weird, right? And then one guy looked at me and he goes, you sat next to me on the plane. And somebody said, is there anybody here from San Francisco? And everyone raised their hand. That was a kind of a pattern, you know? And I like the doctor. That's the response. The nurse went and told the doctor. And the doctor said it was probably just a coincidence. That didn't reassure me at all. I said, I want a new doctor. I said, how old is this doctor? And they said, well, he's about 75. I said, could I have a doctor that's maybe half that age? Maybe somebody who's still practicing medicine. There's a thought. And they got this guy who came out, and all the people said, we were all on the same plane. And I said, they had two kinds of meals. One was fish and one was chicken. Did anybody here have the fish? And no one raised their hand. We all ate the same thing. The other people were fine. It's just those of us that ordered the chicken. And so I made it a policy now. I try to eat before I get on airplanes. When they come by and they go, can I serve you some food? I go, same to you, buddy. And then I go, you eat it first. You know. Now, they've gotten pretty good at sterilizing food. The other thing you can do is order a kosher meal. Even if you're not, you don't have to be Jewish to eat kosher meals. It's cleaner. They have rules about how you do things. They knew about hygiene and bacteria 40,000 years before the microscope. And I asked this old rabbinic Jew one time how they figured this stuff out. And he said, you don't need microscopes to be able to see bacteria. He said, didn't you know that? I said, I thought you were the hypnosis guy. And I went, huh? He said, here's a magnifying glass. Just to hold it up, he said, look at the magnifying glass. Now imagine one next to it. And he said, now double the power of the magnifying glass and double it again, right? And double it again. And then suddenly it was just like looking through a microscope. You'd see microbes and everything. You could do it with your imagination. That's what these old rabbinic Jews did. Very clever people. People kept dying when they would eat pork. They noticed, ate pork, died. And they wrote that down. They said, don't eat pork. They didn't know about trichinosis. So now there are Jews who still don't eat pork because they're not supposed to. But it was about dying. That was the important part. Moshe Feldenkrais, when I was modeling the way he did body work on people, told me a story about how he forced himself to learn to eat pork because they had ingrained it in him so much as a child that, and he knew that if you cook pork at a certain temperature, there was no more trichinosis, so it wasn't dangerous. And so he went ahead and he ate some, and he got violently ill. And so when he got done throwing up, he went back out and he ate some more, and he threw up again, and he did it all day until it stopped. Because he said he wasn't going to let any stupid idea get in the way of his own personal freedom. Pretty good thought, don't you think, Paul? You know how ideas spread around, especially good ones. Bad ideas spread around because people start to, they teach people to question things. Like, and you can really, self-doubt, it can be very persuasive. You know, I mean, you can sit in your house. I used to love to do this to, when people took too much cocaine. You could just sit with them and, you know, they'd go in the bathroom 25 times and come out, start doing this, and then you go, did you hear anything outside? And they go, like what? And I go, I thought I heard footsteps right outside that window. And they'll walk over and look out the window, and I go, look out. You can't see a thing out there. But I hear something. Can you hear anything? And I go, I wonder if somebody's trying to break into your house. You know, there's windows all around this house. Pretty soon they'd be looking in every window. You can scare the crap out of them. I used to go outside and throw pebbles at the window. Get them really nervous, scare the crap out of them. Then I'd hide under the window, and when they'd go up and look at it, I'd slap the window really hard. Then I'd anchor it, and I'd say, now imagine white powder on a mirror, and I'd fire the anchor off. Save them like $1,000 a week. Some of the musicians that I worked with had drug habits that were astronomical. I mean, some of these guys could live in the state of toxic psychosis, that if a normal human had even a tenth of what these people had in their body, they would have been dead. I mean, do you realize somebody got kicked out of Motley Crue for bad behavior? I didn't know if you guys really thought that through, but I read that in the newspaper, because I met these guys in a hotel once. I had a room next to theirs, and they were just absolutely insane. These guys shot cocaine with hypodermic needles into their penis on a regular basis for fun. I mean, to begin with, you have to be pretty high to even think about something like that. So I think they were taking other drugs first, because you have to take some really stupid drug to decide you want to stick a big needle in your penis. But I mean, these guys were screwing groupies, drinking, going on benders all over the planet. I mean, they had millions of dollars and every opportunity to do everything. And one day in the newspaper, one of the guys gets kicked out of the band. And I couldn't imagine, what would you have to do to get kicked out of the band? You know, what did he do? Stay sober for a day? I mean, I just couldn't think of what it was. Because they had 4 other band members up there, and they said, we're not at liberty to say what the problem is, but there are just some behaviors we're not willing to tolerate. Right? And so we all agreed, and, but the band will keep playing, but we're not going to allow this guy to be in the band anymore. And I thought, well, what in God's name did he do? Satanic rituals? Did he burn babies alive? I mean, or did he give up taking drugs or something? I don't know. Hit a bad note? How would they know? They play so loud. The doctor that travels, they have a doctor that travels with the band, and he actually puts a butterfly IV in their arm so they can just come backstage and he can give them drugs. And he told me that mostly he gives them vitamin B12 and I believe the only reason that it works is because it's pink and iridescent. He doesn't think it actually does anything, but he said when you give people a shot of it and they see it in the needle, It's an iridescent pink color. People, it really is convincing it must do something. And I think there's a lot to that when you give people things that are mighty strange looking, because I've done it with my clients, you know. I've done things like I put iridescent powder inside of just a glass of water, and it was actually the iridescent powder wasn't in the water, it was on the outside of the glass, and then put a black light inside the room. Actually, they were plant lights, and then walked in with this, and I put a little dry ice in it so smoke came out of the top. Walked in with a black robe on, walked up to this guy, and I said, I have concocted the solution to this, you know. And because this guy was heavy into this devil worship stuff. He'd been in a cult, and they got into devil worship, and they got into worse and worse behaviors. And his parents had him kidnapped, and the deprogrammers couldn't get anywhere with this guy. He was going, and Satan will burn your soul in hell. And he still wanted to go back to the Satanists, and they were doing crap like they were cutting themselves up with knives and shit. This guy had scars all over him, which I don't think is really the best behavior. If you want to have fun, there's easier ways than slicing yourself with a knife, you know. You can think of a good joke, you know. Relax, you know. But these people are driven by bad feelings, not by good feelings. They feel so bad that they have to do something that other people won't do so that they can feel cooler than all the other people that aren't doing it. And it doesn't even matter what it is. They build one idea in their head, and everything has to fit the idea. So in order to get a new idea, and I had to walk right through the middle of the picture. So when they brought him up to my place, and I locked him in an office, and I painted the room black. Everything in it was black. Carpet, black, everything. His parents were fairly well off. But we painted it black, big pentagrams, you know, skulls. I had the skulls anyway. Well, I studied chiropractic medicine for years, and I had skeletons, and I dragged all that stuff and put it around. You know, I even got my little dog a black robe, too, a little hat. And she hated everyone, you know, except me, so she was, you know, she was like the spawn of Satan herself. I put her on a little chain with spikes on her neck, you know, and she's had her like this. And he sat down in a chair, and he goes, no, you're not going to be able to do anything to change me. And I looked at him, and I said, I'm not going to do it. The legions are. My name is Legion. I am many. I am one. That always scares people. That Revelation shit scares everybody. That's some scary shit, you know. Armageddon. I'm getting to it pretty soon, though. So I told him, you know, I went downstairs, and this guy that had kidnapped him was some kind of bodyguard guy that worked for the CIA or something. Stood in the room so he couldn't escape. And I mean, this guy was like Mr. Karate, you know. Kid tried to get up, and he just went, and the guy dropped in the chair, and I went, cool. And I came up with this glass, and I said, you're going to drink this? And I said, and the demons will fill the inside of you. And I said, you're not afraid of demons, are you? You're a Satanist, right? And it's glowing with this kind of stuff's coming out of there. And he goes, demons? And I said, drink it and find out. And as he swallows the last thing, I said, oh, oops, I forgot. That's the demon killer. I said, oh, that's the thing that will immune you from Satan for the rest of your life. Ripped open my robes, and I had white robes on. And he looked at the glass, he looked at me, and he dropped the glass. Suddenly he goes, I feel it. I feel it. And he went through this whole thing, and you should have seen this CIA guy. This guy looked at me like, you know, because they'd been trying everything with this guy for hours and hours. I did this in 20 fucking minutes. I just had the room adequately prepared. And of course, when I talked to him about demons, I could be quite convincing. I've read all the stuff about it. And, you know, he thought he knew about it, but I've read them in the ancient texts. You know, let us remember who was the guy talking to demons. That was King Solomon. You know, the Babylonian, the whores of Babylon came down, the white witches, and taught Solomon how to bind the demons. And that's what the Ring of Solomon is. And when I explained this to him, he said, I've seen the Ring of Solomon in pictures. Right? And then he looked down at my hand, and of course I had a copy of the ring on my finger. And I looked at him, and I said, they tried to take you away. I said, but I'm the one that can bind the demons. I said, even Satan fears me. And he said, Satan fears no one. And I said, ask him. So I had Satan appear. That really scared the guy from the CIA. Because I put him in a deep trance, kind of a handshake interrupt thing. Told him when he opened his eyes, Satan would be there quivering before me. And then he opened his eyes and looked, you know, because he was in a deep trance. Shit, if he's mind-fucked by all these people in these cults, you think I can't mind-fuck him? I know more about brainwashing than they'll ever know. This guy's looking at Satan quivering before him and looking at me and going... And after he drank the drink, that was it. He was mine, and he still is. He now does training in neuro-linguistic programming. So how you doing, Owen? No, I'm just kidding. This guy's an older guy now. He's a nice guy, and he does cult deprogramming, but except for one bad thing. In the United States, the cult deprogramming hotlines to help people with stuff like that, where you get brainwashed, were sued repeatedly by the Scientologists. And until they were bankrupt, and then the Scientologists bought everything they had out of the bankruptcy court. So now when you call a deprogramming hotline, you get a Scientologist instead of a deprogrammer. Seems a little fraudulent to me, don't you think? Because I know I call constantly. I'm just that kind of guy. I can't resist some of these things. You know, free lectures. I love that kind of stuff. Demonstrations. I go into these cult things to see what they're doing, but I have a rule, don't drink the tea. Because they do try to drug you, and some of these drugs can really put you in a bad state. If you're going to get your drugs, make sure you get it from your local street dealer, somebody you can trust. That's my theory. Stay away from pharmacies. Their drugs are impure. They're not done by chemists who care about their work. Plus, the pharmaceutical drugs that are given, you know, there are some good things. Antibiotics are wonderful things. They're now making better drugs than they ever have, too. These pharmaceutical companies have come up with some cool things. Viagra saves me hours of work, believe me. You know, these guys come up and I go, I have to talk to you privately. I go, here, take one of these. You know, blue fluorescent pill. Think about it. Great idea, though. I think, you know, it's women now are going to start cooking with it. I think it's the deal. It's they're going to go, how come the mashed potatoes are blue, dear? Just eat your potatoes. I think we'll be staying in tonight. Took a while for that joke to get there, didn't it? Yeah, for a long time staying in. It's an interesting thing to me, but some of the drugs they give people, especially the drugs that are for mental patients, are bad. But now young psychiatrists are learning pharmacology. In the U.S., at least, they're starting to say, look, you're not going to be able to treat patients behaviorally. We've never been able to do it, so let's stick with body chemistry. Now that we know more about how neurons work and more about how drugs affect them and how the motor cortex works in the brain, we may actually start generating psychiatrists that help their patients. And my greatest clientele has turned out to be the psychologists that I made fun of all these years. And I picked on them incessantly. But I've always done the one thing they hate, which is I don't just talk the talk. I go, give me your clients, and then I make them so they're not crazy anymore. They're, in fact, less crazy than the therapists. Went to a mental hospital, do training. It's okay. I didn't think they were getting it. They were looking at me like, well, you think you can do these kinds of things. Brought in 2 patients, and I demonstrated with patients. Took a paranoid schizophrenic and made him relaxed and friendly. Took me 15 minutes. And he was fucking freaky. He wouldn't get out from behind the couch. There were 60 people in this room watching. Perfect place to treat a paranoid schizophrenic, by the way. And he got behind a couch and wouldn't come out. So they said, they kept trying to get him out. I said, leave him the fuck alone. I said, you think he can't hear from behind the couch? And so I just sat on the couch and began speaking. Pretty soon he came out and sat down next to me. Looked out at all the psychiatrists. And I said, how do you feel? And he said, I feel fine. And then he started laughing. I said, what are you laughing at? And he went, them. And they said, we don't understand how you made him so relaxed. And I said, well, it was really funny. I made it so he couldn't help but laugh at what he was doing. But see, like Andy, people came off the TV and followed him around. That's got to be frightening. I mean, think about it. That would be really scary. I mean, think about, some of these movies you've seen on television. I mean, just think about Tony Robbins coming out of your television and following you around. I don't care what country you're on, or what time of the day or night. Turn on the TV, there's Tony, telling you to buy these fucking tapes, that's right, he invented neuro-associative conditioning, the great innovation over NLP. Except no one can seem to tell me what's in it that I haven't already invented. I seem to be missing this. Maybe one day one of you could get him to explain that in great detail. It's taking credit for other people's work, I think, is a stupid thing, especially when they work with demons and study voodoo. I wouldn't be that stupid. He just went through something that cost him $30 million as a new wife. He had the new one redesigned. Lots of plastic surgery. Tony's had a little plastic surgery. Lots of people are doing it. I'm thinking of adding a new body part. I was thinking of a third eye. That would be cool. Maybe pointed ears, something like that. Something to fulfill people. I was thinking of getting a tattoo on my chest that had an on and off knob. Something like that. It's one of those things to me. I'm always trying to look for different possibilities. That there's a guy who does dowsing, and he finds water. It's absolutely incredible. This old guy, and he came out and found water on some property I had, and they drilled a well in the middle of a drought. It's been going on for 7 years, and it's gushing wells. Nobody for miles around had any water, and I had rainbirds for watering lawns. I even ran a pipe to my neighbor's house because he had a ranch next to mine so that he could have water. Because he was just watching me water things and going, my well is dry, and I've drilled 2 new wells. I can't find any water. And I said, I got plenty. Don't worry about it. And the guy on the other side, who was a mean person who had been nasty to me, had to drive his pickup truck 45 miles and put a water meter on a fire hydrant and filled the back of his truck. He had a water bed and fill it with water and then run a hose and have his kid jump up and down on it and fill his toilets and stuff. And in the meanwhile, my rainbirds are going. But I modeled this guy, found out what altered state he went in, and he did this. And then I said, you've only done water. That's the only thing you've done? And he said, of course, that's what my father did. And I said, would you try and experiment with me? And he said, well, okay. And I said, so I took him to the hospital, and we got 3 patients that had serious tumors, that they already knew they'd had them, they'd run scans, and 3 that were perfectly healthy. And I explained to him what tumors were, showed him the x-rays, and had him take his dowsing stick and go in and find out which ones had the tumors and where, and he found them. And we did, and then we kept doing it, he kept doing it. And I thought, wouldn't that be cool if, you went in for your physical and your doctor took his stethoscope off and pulled out his dowsing stick, checked you over. It'd be so much nicer than these things, because I've had so many MRIs. When I walk by a table with paper clips on it, they all turn to attention like this. I cannot use a magnetic hotel room key anymore. They demagnetize within a half an hour. I spend all my time at the hotels going down to the desk, handing them the keys, and they keep giving them back to me. I'm completely magnetic, and then they tell me I've worked in some of the weirdest places on the earth. I mean, when I had an R&D company, we worked with lasers and chemicals, and I've done probably every unhealthy thing a human being can do. And when I get physical, my doctors always say to me these brilliant things. They go, well, I got back your test results, and I really don't know what to think about this. They said, your blood, this is the one I like, your blood is not human. He said, if you need a transfusion, you're out of luck. He said, your DNA has altered itself somehow or other. He said, as far as I can tell, you don't have human blood. And I said, is that unusual? And he said, well, no. He said, there are some people that have been exposed to certain things over a period of time, and it's altered their DNA to the point where their body's not quite normal. Lemmy from Motorhead, for example, is one.
They went to Switzerland to have his blood switched, so he could go on tour. They take all your blood out and gets rid of your addiction to drugs. And they tested his blood, and they said, if we gave you fresh blood, it would kill you. You don't have human blood. If you ever want to read a funny book, read his autobiography. It's a wonderful book. It came out a couple of years ago. Motorhead is a band, a very strange band. The kind of band that your mother wouldn't want you to watch. And if you went out to see it, you would wonder why anybody would want to watch it ever. But Lemmy happens to be, he's a bass player. They took drugs. And, they tested to find out how much drugs you could stay on for how many years. I mean, he's been dead twice, overdoses and brought back to life, and still went home from the hospital and got high. I mean, some people are just, the bad decision thing, that's all they have. They don't even have the other one. You go, have you ever made a good decision? And they go, huh? They go, no, everything goes in this one place. You go, you don't make pictures anywhere else in your head? And they go, no, it's just the one of the drugs, and that's it. There's the drugs one, and then sometimes sex is behind it. To me, variety, it's what creates choice. And with people learning to tell the difference between what you believe strongly and what you doubt, both are very powerful things. If I ask you guys, do you know when the sun is coming up tomorrow? You do believe the sun is coming up tomorrow. It doesn't actually come up, the planet actually spins. It does turn and the universe is holding still or something. Doesn't really matter. If you didn't think there was going to be a tomorrow, going to a training program would mean you probably only have the bad decision thing. Because you go, the world is going to end tomorrow, so I think I'll learn something I can use in the future. That wouldn't be a good choice. But if you stop and I ask the question, if I go, is the sun coming up tomorrow? You go, yes, you feel that certainty, and you see a picture in your head. That's one of the most important pictures you make, because that's the one that determines what you believe. Now, if you look at where that picture is, point to it. Where is it? You should know where that picture is. It's the most important one you make, because if you can make yourself believe things, right, it's a certain distance, it's a certain size, and when you look at it, you have that I believe it feeling. Now, you guys know how to spin feelings, right? Now, what I want you to do is in the same location, the same size, the same distance, make a picture where you see yourself becoming more powerful, happier, freer, more able to do everything you want to do with greater concentration. All of those things, put it in that belief place, spin the feeling wildly inside yourself. Close your eyes, see it clearly. And until you absolutely and utterly believe it. Spin it and spin it and spin it. This is the secret of success. You take what works and you use it. Right? Now, if you have bad beliefs that you're going to have trouble, right? Well, there's some things you just don't believe that just sounds totally ludicrous. What sounds ludicrous to me is that Jimmy Swaggart is somebody that God talks to. That God would want Jimmy Swaggart to collect money for him. If God wanted somebody to collect some money for him, he'd go to Donald Trump. He would not go to Jimmy Swaggart. God would not be that stupid. Jimmy Swaggart, he comes on TV and he says, you make those checks out to me personally, Jimmy Swaggart, and send them to my P.O. box in Canada. This is the guy that owns half of Baton Rouge, one of the wealthiest guys, and they catch this guy out by the airport in a limousine with personalized plates. They say Swaggart on it, and he disguised himself by putting on a tennis headband, hired a $15 crack whore, right, to watch him masturbate, and was surprised that the media caught him. He's on TV every day, on every station. And the best disguise he could come up with was a tennis headband. This guy's a little cheap, isn't he? A $15 crack whore? Excuse me. But he went on TV and he cried. He said, God has forgiven me. This guy's a good manipulator. So everybody else said, well, I guess we have to if God did. Well, not me. I asked God and he said he didn't. In fact, several of them said that. I asked Shiva, and she said, I'm going to hurt him. See, to me, I think one of the wonderful things is that you can believe as much as you want. And the fact that other people don't believe it doesn't matter. Because the first belief to build is that everybody should have the freedom to believe what they want. Just because they disagree with you doesn't mean you have to change your mind. You can always go, cool. I went to India, and there are people that worship bowls and things, and they told me about their religions, and I went, cool. I went, and people taught me forms of psychotherapy that did nothing, and I went, great. Yeah, I'm going to go get some cigarettes. I'll be right back. And then I wouldn't see him for 5. I ran into one 5 years later. He said, I thought you were coming back to the Institute. You went out for cigarettes. I went, that's what it was. I'll be right back. No point in arguing with him. I don't have enough respect for him for that. But when people show me things that work, I try them and they work. I have to use them. Now, if you can build one new belief, if you can build one new feeling, you can build as many as you want. This means you have the most exciting possibility in front of you. You can begin to design your entire future around building beliefs that say you're capable of doing things, or if you have some bad habits. I know now they're trying to force every woman on the face of the earth to be a fucking bulimic. Excuse me, I still think Marilyn Monroe is one of the best looking women in the world, and she did not diet. You know, she did not live with her fucking finger down her throat. One of the problems with the throwing up all your food is that it dissolves your teeth. Bulimics, you know, and it hurts. Raw nerves, you know, acid on your teeth, acid on your stomach walls, and it's a lot easier to just get guys to like you anyway. Guys are not that smart. Let's face it. I've accepted it. Most of you guys, listen to this. I know, I've been married for 31 years. Let me explain to you how no one said I could stay married for 31 years, but I'm a fairly smart guy. When my wife walks in, holds up an empty dress, and is in one and says, which one do you like best? Right? Guys, you know what you're supposed to do? Pick the one with the woman in it. Okay? Because you're not really a fashion editor from a magazine or anything. So the fact that she's asking your opinion probably doesn't mean that... I've seen guys, 100 times I've been over somebody's house and we're going out to dinner, the woman goes, which one do you like best? And the guy stops and goes, well... what the fuck is the matter with him? You know, I'm like, you're going to pay for this, I know. And he goes, well, I remember when you wore this blue dress 2 years ago. And I go, Jesus, he's in a kung fu show. You know, every time somebody tried to pick on this guy in the kung fu thing, he'd say, and he's 3 years old, Master, how do you avoid violence? He goes, by not dreaming when people are trying to hit you. That would be the first step. No age regression when attacked. No, guys, it's real simple. You know, you pick the one with the woman in it, and then you get to have a woman. You pick the empty dress, you get to end up wearing it. Of course, that's more of a British thing than an Irish thing. Every time, I don't know what is it with the Brits. Every time you turn around, these guys are putting on dresses. Something about the school system there or something. First time I went to work in England, I picked up the newspaper in the morning and flopped it open, and it said, MP found murdered in his own home. And there's a picture of a guy in fishnet stockings hanging from the ceiling with a banana out of his ass. And I thought, MP, multiple personality. No, it's part of Parliament, right? This is the same as a congressman or a senator in the US. And the guy's got on black fishnet stockings with a banana up his ass. And it said, government denies any homosexuality involved. Well, I guess not. A banana is not a homosexual. But it does seem to me something very strange is going on. And everybody was so nonchalant about it over there. They said, oh, yes, that sort of thing happens all the time here. I said, I went in the supermarket, I stay away from the fruit counter. There's a lot of guys in there looking at the fruit. A friend of mine is a doctor who works in the emergency ward in San Francisco. And he started telling me about some of the things that come in. And he had a guy had come in with a gerbil up his ass. Shaved gerbil, this little animal, and they shaved the hair off of it and stuck it up his ass. This gay guy, guess couldn't get a date or something. And he walked by the pet store and went, because this was not the gerbil's idea. The gerbil didn't see the gay guy go by and go, razor. Definitely, I think this falls in the bad thing, because the gerbil, once it got in there, got pissed off and started biting the insides of this guy, almost killed him. And of course, working in an emergency ward, you have to do some pretty grim things. He said, but he said, having to cut somebody's ass open and get a gerbil out, and the gerbil was so happy to get out of his ass, he couldn't believe him, But he said, this is not really what I envisioned when I thought about becoming a healer. He said, And when I got home, my mom said, well, how did it go at the hospital today? He said, what do you say? Well, you don't believe what the shit happened. So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a shorter lunch, apparently. There's nothing going on today. There's no cars on the street. I couldn't even get a taxi this morning, so you should have no trouble going and having lunch. Take an hour and 14 minutes and come back here. And the boys are going to spend a little time with you, and then I'll be back later. Have a good time. I'll see you. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Well, I had a little trouble getting a taxi cab over here. Taxi cab pulled up in front of my hotel, and I said, I tried to open the door, and he said, no. And I said, aren't you a taxi cab driver? And he said, yes. He said, but I can't pick people up here. And I said, well, then move up a couple feet. And that's what it is in front of the hotel. I said, just move a couple of feet over. I said, my wife is handicapped. I said, she can't stand for very long. I want to put her in the taxi. And he said, well, we have rules that have to be followed. And I said, we're in Ireland, for heaven's sakes. This is one of the few countries that's still a banana republic and should be proud of it. It's one of the things I love about this country. Somebody once said, in Ireland, no means you haven't talked to the right person yet. I mean, I like it. They've made so many rules. Where I used to live, I just couldn't take it anymore. They not only with the government making so many rules, the building I lived in went mad. I mean, absolutely mad. There was we all have condominiums in the building, and they had a homeowners association. And when I was like the third person to move in, and you got a book this big with rules, things like don't shoot your neighbor. If you have a dog, don't let it crap in the hallway. And if you're going to have loud music at night, the building's totally soundproofed. Keep your door closed so it doesn't go down the hall. Simple things like that. Don't park in other people's parking spots. And inside of 2 years, the book turned into something this thick. Because they met every week, they felt obligated to make up new rules. However, they didn't have that good decision, bad decision thing. So, and then they went one step further, because I don't pay any attention to them. I just stay at my place, and I come and I go, and I don't bother anybody, and if somebody bothers me, I tell them not to. Most of them can kind of remember that I lived there, but after that, it's all very blurry. But then I got a note. I'd been gone for 5 months. I was traveling around Europe. And I got a note. When I travel, my dog goes and stays with my mother, who lives, 500 miles away. But I got a note. Somebody sent me my mail, and in the mail was a note from the homeowners associations telling me to appear before the disciplinary committee because my dog had bit someone 3 weeks ago. And the dog hadn't been there in 4 months, right? And it was one of my neighbors that I didn't get along with. And if anybody would bit him, it would have been me. I don't let my dog do work I want to do myself, okay? The ball thing, the dog can do, but when it comes to this guy, I don't like this guy. This guy thinks he's God's gift to women, and he's works for an airline and has a uniform, but really all he does is stand behind a desk and take 2 hours to find something on a computer that should take 5 minutes. But he always had a different girl there every other night, and he would always cook the same thing and say the same lines and play the same fucking music and leave his door open. And then he would go out on the back porch and call his friends on the phone and brag about it. And so I tried closing my window, I tried everything, and then finally I said, look, if you're going to act like a total dickhead, at least do it inside your own apartment. I don't want to hear about this stuff. So I finally started recording him and then playing it over the radio. I have a friend that works for one of the alternative radio stations, and he's such a weirdo that what we started doing was playing it all over San Francisco. So then every woman in San Francisco found out about this guy. And they actually put a column in one of the free presses where they drew cartoons of this guy. They called him Mr. Suave. And I mean, this guy lied about which car was his. In the car, there's a guy there that's a very famous musician, has a beautiful Ferrari. And as he'd walk by, go, yes, don't you love my car? And this guy was such a phony. But the truth about him is he was a miserable cuss. He was always constantly, he'd get up in the morning and he'd crankily walk down the hall, and he could never get his mailbox open. I guess there was something wrong with the lock. So, I think revenge is something that should be done very slowly and over a really long period of time. I don't like to vent my anger at people. I like to gnaw at them for years. It's that kind of thing. For example, one of the greatest events of my life is that I'm going to release my autobiography the day after I die. And I know things about people. Lots of people. And I signed things saying I would never in my entire life let anyone know about it. So the day after I die, everybody's going to know about it. Plus, when I owned the security company that I won in the poker game, by the way, because of the lie detector machines, I had these guys that worked for me that were private detectives that were just geniuses. I mean, these guys could do things. And one time somebody tried to take away a company I owned. They filed a big lawsuit and they did stock things. And these guys went absolutely nuts without my even asking them, because I didn't really care about the company that much. It wasn't that important to me. I figured what I do requires skill. So as soon as I'm gone, then owning the company is not going to do much good. In fact, it did go bankrupt without me. I tricked them too. I really did something that probably no one has done. I owned 100% of the stock, and I was chairman of the board and president of the company. And they created some fraudulent thing to make stock. But I went in, and as chairman of the board, I fired myself as president of the company. Then I resigned from the board, and I gave my stock to the police. Donated it to the police athletic league, and left. And once I was gone, then all they had was the police wanting to know why they weren't getting money from the stock, getting the district attorney to go in and review everything in the company, and since I fired myself as president of the company, I sued the company itself for firing me for no reason. So these people then had to hire a lawyer and defend the actions of the chairman of the board of the directors, who's no longer there at the company, so he's no longer responsible for firing the president of the company, who is being paid quite a large salary, and it's treble action damages, so we're talking about a $40 million lawsuit. And of course, it never went to trial because I don't like lawsuits. I just like the publicity and the fear. That was enough for me. It was that when they get the papers and they're stirred with giant things of papers. And of course, over the years, I've trained thousands and thousands of attorneys. But attorneys don't really necessarily like the way I like to do things. They tell you in depositions, don't say anything. But the truth is, when they ask questions, you can answer in as much detail as you would like. And in any tonality you want. And using any expression. And I've had attorneys plead with me to stop after just the first question. They said, so can you describe your profession? And I do, in great detail, much longer than this seminar. And I used New Jersey tonality the entire time, because I was born in New Jersey, and that Jersey accent never really goes away. It stays with you all the time, and it's always available at all times. Of course, on the transcript, none of that comes out. I've had stenographers stop and look at me and go, I'm not involved in this, you know. And I go, sorry. Because to me, it doesn't matter to me. I said, no one can take away from me the most important thing I have, which is my skill. And, you know, and they can't take away my children because they're not leaving. And my kids are 30 years old, too. It doesn't get any cheaper, I found out. I had this illusion after they were 18 it was going to get cheaper. It doesn't. It gets more expensive. My daughter called me on the phone 30 days ago and said, Dad, I found a house I want to buy. And I went, that's nice, dear. You're vice president of a company. You're just informing me of this, aren't you? And she said, well, actually. And I went, oh, God, here it comes. It was bad enough when we needed a little money for a car, but a house? She lives in Berkeley, California. This is like buying a flat in Mayfair in London, you know. I mean, you don't buy houses for a couple of $100,000, you know. You think Dublin's expensive? You know, you can't rent a garage for less than $500,000 in Berkeley. And, you know, and it's just totally ridiculous. But after I talked to her, I couldn't remember what she had talked about. I just found myself writing checks. It's been like that with my family for years, but I don't mind. My wife taught me something about that. A lot of people feel bad about money. They go, I feel bad because I don't have money. And they feel bad because they do. People win the lottery, and then they think, people only like me for my money. I had somebody come in and tell me, you know, this guy inherited $10 million in 1970, $10 million US, tax-free. And he was miserable as can be. He was depressed, he was a depressive, and he was on the edge of suicide. And he came in and he said, I just don't think anybody likes me except for my money. And I went, you're right. I said, I don't like you. And you've only been here 4 minutes. I said, your psychiatrist wrote me this note, and it says in there, he doesn't like you. He said, I referred this patient because I can't stand listening to him. I said, if your psychiatrist can't even stand listening to you, you must just be a real shit. I said, and before you had this money, did you have any friends? He went, no. And I said, so the money didn't really help. It just made you notice that people didn't like you. Really had nothing to do with it, did it? I said, if you're worried about the money making it so you can't tell people who like you from those that don't, get rid of it. And he goes, I wouldn't do that. He said, well, you're willing to kill yourself, but you're not willing to give away the money. That makes a lot of sense. I said, or you could just learn to be nice. That would be an alternative to everything. I know people don't think about this as the alternative. The trick is that if you make it so it's a joy to be around you, you'll attract joyous people. Now I have to tell you about the most important piece of research that I think has been done in the history of civilization. A group of scientists, and don't ask me how they got this idea, but they took a yogurt culture, and yogurt's not like the smartest thing on the planet, but it's smarter than the researchers. They made a yogurt culture, they divided it in half, and attached half of it to the equivalent of galvanic skin response, something that could measure the electrical activity in the yogurt. And then they poured milk on the other half of the yogurt, which is what yogurt eats. Yogurt eats milk. But when this half got fed, the half with the electrical stimulus stuff began to respond immediately. It knew the other half was being fed. And the scientists went, wow, ESP. And in yogurt yet, just tells you about evolution, yogurt is more evolved than scientists. So they tried pushing it further and further apart, but still the yogurt knew what the other yogurt was up to. They put lead walls in between it, and still yogurt knew yogurt. It's just that simple. They tried all measures of the electromagnetic spectrum, and yet every time they fed the yogurt, the other yogurt knew what was going on. So at the end of their rope, because people never come to me first, by the way, that's not the way it works. People don't go, I'm feeling a little depressed. I think I'll go see Richard. Nah, they spend 8-9 years in therapy. They go through mega vitamin treatments. They hug trees. They go to naked seminars in California where they sit around in hot tubs and try and pretend like it doesn't bother them to have their clothes off with total strangers. And of course, to me, I think when I take my clothes off, I want to be affected when I see other people naked, especially women. I want that to affect me. I don't know which psychologist decided looking at people naked shouldn't affect you, but my guess is his sex life doesn't amount to much. He wants to make it so that when you look at the universe, it affects you not at all. He wants to be less than yogurt. Now, when they contacted me, they told me what happened, and they said, what do you think's going on? Now, here's the funny thing. The reason they called me is I had destroyed $5 million worth of research in 10 minutes. I went to visit this big place, and they had these rats running down mazes. And the rats would run down and find the cheese. And they said, they were called behaviorists, and behaviorists believed that all learning was done because implicit muscle movements. So the rat, somehow or other, the muscles do go 5 steps, do 6 steps, and you find the cheese. According to these psychologists, rats don't think. Now, this tells me one thing. They did not grow up in the same city I did. Rats not only think, they plan and use blueprints. Okay, rats are smart animals, especially city rats. They can find, it's amazing. You can go in buildings where there are no rats. When they tear them down, 500,000 come out of the middle of nowhere and run up and down the streets. And they have nests and family lives and everything's going on. But the researchers told me they don't think they. And I said, and you prove this? They said, oh, yes, we proved this. And they showed me volumes of research and hours of testing. And I said, when a rat runs, does it use the same muscles as when it swims? And they said, of course not. I said, watch this. And I put wax inside the maze, filled the maze with water, put the cheese in, dropped the rat in, and it swam right to the cheese. So everything they were doing was wrong. Bye-bye research grant, bye-bye institute. So they all went out and wrote other grants, got other jobs. And when they got stuck on the yogurt phenomenon, they called me up and came in and told me, they said, what do you think's going on here? And I said, well, when you pluck a piano string, another piano string vibrates. It's called a sympathetic vibration. Ancient pagans believed that magic was done with, there's two kinds of magic, high ritual magic and sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic, voodoo people build a doll that looks like somebody, take a piece of their hair, or what we like to call DNA, and they stick a pin in this, or they put herbs on this, and it affects the human. By having you see, we're discovering lots more about that voodoo really has a kind of a solid DNA base to it that seems like these voodoo priests somehow or other figured out about DNA and all kinds of stuff. But as it turns out that when things vibrate that have the same nature, things and other things in the universe vibrate. Now, as physicists, we're beginning to discover that this may be the way to do space travel, that you may be able to resonate things in magnetic fields and actually have them appear on the opposite side of magnetic fields. The experiment that was done was actually done in my laboratory. We created a magnetic field about 20 yards across, and a stable magnetic field, and then in it we created an instant electromagnetic field, a false thing done with electricity. And on the other side, every part of the magnetic field changed instantly. There was not a wave phenomenon. When this changed, this over here changed. Same thing happened with the yogurt, by the way. Opposite ends of the linear accelerator at Stanford fed this yogurt over there knew what was going on, and there was no time differentiation. It was instantaneous. And I have a love for everything that physicists can't explain. I did a seminar on Einstein's 100th birthday for people at Livermore Labs, gave each of them a little box of stuff, and one by one we went through anomalies of science. Anomalies are things that we have no answers to and we can't even make up excuses. For example, we have no idea how magnets work. They put the magnet on the top of the table, the one on the bottom of the table, and move it around. We don't know why. We have no explanation for it, and we're not even close to getting one. There's only two substances which are impervious to magnetism, and they're both artificially made. They were made for the space shuttle. I use them. I do good magic tricks with them. Actually make cards, glue new metal on there, put it on top of my briefcase, which has a 5,000 gauze electromagnet in it. By the way, the reason I have that is because when I turn it on, if anybody has audio tapes, they go blank. I find this is very helpful when I go to court. When they go to play depositions that they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, I put my briefcase and I turn the handle, and every tape recording of any kind within 300 yards is now blank, including the one they're making at that moment. You know, as we all sit there, if somebody has a fluorescent light, it might light up. But in the meanwhile, actually you can watch the room gets brighter as it happens, because the fluorescent lights in a courtroom suddenly gets bright in there. One of my friends is a nurse. She's a black lady, about 75, and her son was arrested on a drug charge. And this guy was absolutely framed. Guy at work asked him, he said, "Will you give me a ride home?" And he said, "Sure." So I drove home, and when the guy went up to the stairs, he yelled down, he said, "Oh, I left my briefcase in the car. Why don't you bring it up and we'll have a cup of coffee?" So he grabbed the briefcase, he walked up the stairs, set it on the table, and the police arrested him. And they videotaped him, and they opened the briefcase, and it was full of cocaine. So they were going to send him to prison, probably for like 25 years. I don't know if the police arranged this, or if this guy was a drug dealer and then said he'd get him a bigger drug dealer. I don't know, nor did I really care. So I just went to court with my briefcase, sat behind the district attorney, put my briefcase down and went like this as he brought all the evidence in and set it under the table, right? And as he went there, and then he started out his case by showing the videotape, and there was nothing on it. So he pulled out the backup tape, and there was nothing on that either. And the judge yelled at him, and he said that he had one in his office. And I thought, didn't think about that. This guy made an extra copy. And so I said to the district attorney, I said, I need to talk to you about another case. Can I walk to your office with you? And he said, sure. So I went down there, and we walked all the way down, and as we were walking back, and then he got in and he put that tape in, didn't work either. Thrown out of court. To me, there's always a technological solution to everything. There's a way to do everything. But I thought what they were doing to this young kid was just unacceptable. And this lady had been a nurse, and she had helped lots and lots of people. And when she came to me, she came to me because she had a nervous breakdown. And the psychiatrist said, I try to talk to her, and she yells at me and slaps me. And she was a big lady. It was really great. She would go, "They shouldn't have done, my son wouldn't be a liar." Bam! And he goes, "Well, maybe your son is a drug dealer." And bam, she'd hit him again. So they sent her to me because they said, well, nobody hits Richard. And I said, that's not actually true. It's just they don't usually get to do it again. That's not my policy. My policy is give to those who give to you, plus or minus 2. And when it's minus, look out, because my imagination can get really weird. So I said to them, so why are you so upset that yogurt knows yogurt? I said, don't you think the same thing is true about human beings? Because the truth is, that when people start getting depressed, the people around them get depressed. When you get people to start being violent, everybody starts getting violent. It's all kinds of stuff, and not just in one place on the planet, all over the damn place. We can affect one another. The question is, who can hold the vibration the most steady? Now, I tried to explain to them that it's really a simple phenomenon. I said, when I work with clients, I don't establish rapport by going into their state of depression and bringing them out. I stay happy as can be until they have to give up. It's just that simple. People who can't be hypnotized, I don't care who told them that. Usually it's a post-hypnotic suggestion. Their belief that they can't alter their state of consciousness. People do it all the time. How many times have you been sitting behind a car at a stoplight and the light changes and the guy in front of you doesn't? They're just there. These people will look at you and go, I cannot go into a trance. And I usually go, well, not a good one. But that doesn't mean just because you haven't done something doesn't mean that you can never do it. The fact that, I asked this depressive once, I said, have you ever been happy all day for a whole day? And he said, never. And I said, that's because you don't know how. You're not good at it, so you're going to spend the day with me. And I want you to try as hard as you can in vain to remain depressed. Now. And I went into a state of feeling absolutely wonderful and just stared at him. And he went, I feel funny. I said, that's happiness. You're just not used to it. And he goes, you can't just look at somebody and make them happy. And I went, of course you can. Yogurt can do it. I should be more talented than yogurt, don't you think? I mean, you know, they said, because they told me, they said, Dr. Bandler, we can't really allow you to work with patients in our hospitals because you don't have the proper degrees. And I said, well, as far as I can tell, having those degrees, and you can't work with them, means having the degree would get in your way. Means that if you are a PhD psychologist, you have been guaranteed to have been taught things that won't help these people. So you're going to have to go beyond the schooling that you get. Those of you who learned about psychology in college, got to go further. Everything that I learned about physics, I learned not from studying physics. I studied physics and the things they did that worked, but the stuff they didn't know how to do, we have to find out. That's why the first thing I did was start a research and development company. Now, I told these guys, I said, well, the first thing we got to do is to make a little thing. You guys have millions of dollars in research money, and you can't build anything that stops yogurt from knowing each other. And I would like an answer to the following question. Why don't you want the yogurt to know that the other yogurt is drinking the milk? I said, you guys a little short on things to do? You know, not getting any at night or something? I mean, what's the story here? Seems to me that doctors, PhDs, I mean, and we're talking 3 or 4 dozen of them, highly paid people, making $250,000 a year, and they're trying to outwit yogurt. There are people in hospitals. There are depressed individuals. There are violent criminals. There are mentally retarded children. There's a lot of work to be done on this planet. If we're going to change the world in a way and make it the one we want to live in, we got to get out there and let the yogurt talk, okay? I said, now, if I can stop the yogurt from talking, you have to promise me the next thing you do will be devoted to trying to help mentally retarded children or something worthwhile. Unfortunately, in Palo Alto, there's a place called the Center for Mental Retardation. And as far as I can tell, having met the staff, it seems to be working. They even gave me their card, mentally retarded counselor. Mental retardation specialist. Alcoholic counselor, stop drinking. It'll be okay. That's just the behavior, you know, excuse me. When people's behaviors are out of control, then you teach them how to put them in control by building controls in. And I do it very literally. I don't fuck around. I put them in a trance, and I put a knob in their mind that clicks off. And when they hit too much alcohol, it stops and makes it so they get absolutely nauseous if they even think about drinking. They have to drink a certain amount of water before they can do anything again. Guess what? They did pain control for a long time. They hypnotized people and put switches in their head so they could turn the pain off and have people drill their teeth. Why shouldn't we put other switches and knobs in your mind? How about just an adrenaline button? You know, so people get up in the morning and they go, I can't get motivated. And I go, well, let me tell you what I have in your mind. I stop and I say to yourself, now, if you had a knob right here, big red knob, and at the moment you pressed it, adrenaline rushed into your system. It'd be like if the button got pressed and somebody went, ah! And all of that rush that comes into your system was there. Then I wait a while and I go, cool, huh? Now you can add it, you can make it stronger, you can do all these things. The ability of your brain to do these things is your birthright. Now, if instead we theorize about what causes the lack of motivation in human beings, because I've met experts all over the world. They used to hire me to do panel discussions. By the way, I don't get hired for that anymore. I win every time. But I went to places like Oxford, and when there were experts on such subjects. One of the panels that I was on was about abnormal personality. And I was the only one who had one, so I considered myself the world's leading expert. All of these guys are exactly the same. They all looked at me and said, "Such a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Bandler." And I said, "We'll see." They sat there like this, so I said, "Now, what's the subject we're going to discuss today?" And they said, "Well, we realize that you have some radical ideas on how you should treat patients that suffer from apathy and depression." And I said, "Are you going to ask me a question or what?" That was a statement. This is about what you've heard. It has nothing to do with me whatsoever. Don't you guys speak English? And they said, "We are English." And I said, "That's not what I asked you. You're having trouble again, see? When I ask a question, you have to answer it, or I do mean things to you. Have you guys heard about operant conditioning?" And they went, "Well, of course we understand operant conditioning." And I went, "Let me show you how it works. You don't ask me an intelligent question, I induce pain. You ask me an intelligent question, I answer it and make you feel good." Now they do it to dogs. They showed me their own research. They took these dogs, and I like dogs. You shouldn't fuck with dogs and let me know about it. These guys gave me their research studies. They took these dogs and they went in and they showed the dog a circle. And the dog walked up to the circle and it stepped on a button in front of it and food came out. And then they put a C next to it. And the dog went over and it touched it and it gave it an electric shock. Then the next day they opened the circle up a little bit and closed the C a little bit. And the dog could still tell them apart. Like, "Food, stay away from that." And then they switched them back and forth and did it till they got closer and closer to the dog. But I don't know what button to press. And they said the dog becomes very schizophrenic. And I said, "Well, I know how to solve this problem. Stop torturing it." And they said, "Well, we want to know what this has to do with human beings." I said, "Oh, human beings will do shitty stuff like this to dogs. Dogs wouldn't do that." And they said, no, we want to know what it means about schizophrenic human beings." I said, "It doesn't mean anything about schizophrenic human beings." And they said, "Well, you know Gregory Bateson's double-bind of schizophrenia." I said, "Yeah, and I know how to do it, too." "You're about to find out." I said, "Let me show you how it works. You mention anything about hurting dogs again, and guess what will happen?" And they all went, and I went, and slapped 4 of them right across the face. And they didn't even believe it. Sitting out in the audience is 500 Oxford scholars. And I said, "Let me repeat that question." And the one guy goes, "That wasn't a question, was it?" And I said, "Now you're listening." Saying, "You are a good boy, feel good." And he went like this, and I said, "Now, let me show you how good you can feel." And I just looked at him and changed my state. I said, because he looked really tense. I don't know what it is about being an Oxford scholar. I guess when you get a job there, the first thing they do is take you in a room, take a large corn cob and shove that motherfucker up your ass. Because otherwise they wouldn't walk like that. I think I'm just going to, these little coats like this, with glasses on the end of their nose. And they went, "Dr. Bandler, do you expect us to believe the claims you've made about working with schizophrenics?" And I go, and grab them by the balls, squeeze real tight, and I said, "What do you think?" And they go, I have a tendency to believe that you would actually do this sort of stuff." And I said, "Right. Any other questions?" But to them, they like to talk about stuff because, you see, when they start to experiment, they start with a theory to find out what's going on. Guess what Richard did? Richard got the yogurt to not know the other yogurt was fed, and it took me 2 minutes. I said, "Okay, where's all this yogurt you're working with?" And they said, "It's in the kitchen." They had a 100 gallons of yogurt in various forms out there, all from the same original culture, so it was the same family of yogurt. So I said, "Okay, all I need is a large fish aquarium." And they said, "Okay," and they brought in this long fish aquarium, and I put it on the table, and I filled it full of yogurt, put yogurt on one side and yogurt on the other side, put the electrical things on there, they fed this side, the other side didn't know. And they said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, that yogurt vibrated so much, it absorbed it. Because if I'd have fed the tank, both sides would have gone wild. But you fed this little tiny bit over here. All the rest of the yogurt over here knew, but there wasn't enough vibration to tell enough people. You got to make a lot of noise to affect the whole people. Imagine, 30 years, I've gotten every country on the face of the world to have institutes of NLP. I've had people fighting about who gets to do it. The field of psychology, I've done nothing but insult for 35 years, and they're the main people proselytizing my work. You got to make the right kind of noise. I may insult them, but I make it feel wonderful. I make them addicted to it. I know how addiction works. And I make it so that it doesn't make them stressed out. Instead, it does one of the most important things. I told you the 2 keys to learning. First one, altered state. Endomorphemes have a sense of humor. Because even in Oxford, I could imitate them so well, I could get them to laugh. And I said, you call that a laugh? I said, you laugh like that, then you're going to have premature ejaculation. I know it. If you laugh like this, then you get to have real sex. Because understand, it's funny how they all start laughing a lot deeper. But at Oxford, they start looking at each other, so you have to wonder about that. But to me, once you can get people to laugh a little bit, you get a little endomorphemes. You alter their state. Now, I discovered maybe I could use a handshake interrupt. That works pretty good, doesn't it? Oh, Paul, that was quick. You didn't see that coming. But guess what? Even if you do, it still works. That's the cool thing. You can teach people about it and do it, and it still works. Right? I even do it to myself sometimes. I just go like this. Now, knowing how to alter your state becomes very powerful because we're just like yogurt. We're all made out of the same stuff. So I have people come in. For example, I upset a Muslim cleric. I didn't do it intentionally. I upset everyone equally, including myself. I leave no one out. I can offend absolutely anyone. My business card used to say Richard Bandler, killer of sacred cows. Meat available. The Hindus went, you kill cows. I said, not real cows, just sacred cows, just ideas that are going beyond what makes sense. If you have a belief about yourself that says that you're not smart, you're wrong, because I don't believe it. And I'm never wrong in the end. Everybody keeps trying to prove I'm wrong about something. It's a bad gamble, because the only thing in this universe you can count on is what Einstein said about it, is that it's infinite. So therefore, if you do the right thing, you'll always find a way of doing everything. Now, the problem is all of the people that worked on the behavior of other individuals began with the other individual. They didn't begin with themselves. If you go inside and see, if you're going to work with people, I went to a place for it was called the Stress Center, and the letters even looked stressful on the sign. And I have to admit, the people inside were so stressed out, and this guy had this group of people, and they were all like, and they all had blood pressure and medical charts, and the doctors had said you're all going to have coronaries and die if you don't lower your blood pressure. But still, they were hostile. They were heads of corporations. It didn't matter. They were all over the top. And I went in and I said, so you guys have too much stress. Rule number 1, don't. And they said, wow, can't expect us to just stop it. I said, I bet you will. I said, I'll bet you within the next 20 minutes, you guys will be totally relaxed. And I said, let me show you how it's done. That's right. Close your eyes. There you go. See how easy that was? Yogurt knows yogurt. Relaxation knows relaxation. And guess what, David? Pleasure knows pleasure. Now, if you make thoughts inside your head that say you can't do things, well, guess what? That means you can program your mind to do anything. You can make limitations and live by them. You can feel embarrassed. You can be afraid to do things or not. You can pick the thing that would be the toughest thing in the world for you to try and do, the thing you have the least belief in yourself about. And when you think about it, if you're shy, it's walking up and talking to people, Some people say they can't play music Yet all the musicians I ever met were some of the dumbest assholes I'd ever met in my life. It can't be that hard. But you have to believe in yourself 100%, and you have to have a little bit of information. Now, in whatever it is, the first thing is the bad feeling that you've learned to have automatically is exactly the thing you have to be determined to be fed up with. Because the first thing you have to learn to laugh at is your own stupidity. And that's where I have it on everybody. I know what a fucking idiot I am. I make more jokes about me than anybody because I make more mistakes than everyone. I just happen to notice it when I do. I've done things with clients. I'm the one that hypnotized a man and tried to get rid of his ovarian cysts. My secretary put the charts in the wrong room, right? And I walked in and I looked at this thing and I said, boy, this is one of the ugliest women I've ever seen in my life. I said, well, I guess so, but, I shouldn't really criticize other people. Not everybody can be beautiful, right? So I said, now, Sue. And this guy looks over at me and he went, Sue? And I said, that's right, close your eyes now. Like that. And I said, your doctor has asked me to help you to shrink those ovarian cysts away. I want you to go inside and feel your ovaries. You should have seen the look on his face. That's right. And those cramps you've been getting every month, we can get rid of those too. The fear of pregnancy, his face is going all over the place. And I'm going, this is a very odd response for somebody who is trying to avoid a surgical intervention. Usually people are a little more receptive than that. So I walk up and I pick the chart up again and I look at it and I flip to the picture. This is not the right person. So I opened the door and I went to my secretary. And she goes, oops. Goes and switches the charts. And then that big question comes, well, now what do I do? Go in and say, yes, this is just a hypnotic metaphor. David. It just goes to show you that sometimes people goof, and when you goof, then you stop doing it. If you're doing something that's not working, if you're going inside and making feelings that stop you from doing what you most want to in life, what you need to do is to go inside and to realize, if I can look at you and make you feel relaxed, I can look at you and make you feel stupid, just like that. And if you see yourself having that feeling in that situation, and something inside you becomes so fucking determined that says, enough is enough. God, how many times you've done this and you've never been fucking paid a nickel for it? This is fucking ridiculous. And you can just look at yourself and finally you get to the point where you see how stupid it is and you can't help but laugh out loud. That's it. Guess what? Then you get to change it. Now, if you go to therapy and talk about it for 40 fucking years and beat up furniture, it'll never go away. But you'll have lots of reasons for why you're an asshole. A depressed asshole, a weak asshole, a whatever asshole. Doesn't matter whatever stupidity you're doing. But as soon as you start laughing, the endomorphines come up. Free drugs, David. It's like getting all your beers for free for the rest of your life. It's like you look over the counter of the bar and it's you there. And you go to yourself, what are you having today? And you went, ecstasy. You go, here, this one's on us. So then what you do is you start laughing. You start thinking, now, how would I need to feel in order to do the thing I want to do? Some things require concentration. You want to be better at an athletic thing? Different athletic things require different skills. For example, soccer players shouldn't be too relaxed. There's some sports you need to be really relaxed in order to do them. Some of them you need to slow time way down. And some of them, like fishing, you need to speed it up. Somebody took me fishing in Hawaii, and it was the longest day of my entire life. Think about this as a sport. You put string in the ocean and drag it behind a boat and hope the fish can find it. I don't think they're going about this right. Me, I put on diving tanks and go find the fish. Fight it out with them. That seems more like a sport. They tried to teach me golf, and it just doesn't seem like a sport. No one gets hurt. It's just the kind of way I am. They gave me those clubs. I started thinking, yeah, we can do something with this. I said, all right, guys. Hit this guy in the nuts. And he went, whoa, wait a minute. I said, this is not a contact sport. And I went, what? Yeah, you don't get to hit each other? You have all these clubs and nobody gets to hit anyone? What kind of nonsense is that? And they said, no, this is about concentration, focus. And I went, okay. They said, oh, God, can you see that little hole way the fuck down there? Yeah. Got a flag over it. It's so fucking far away. He said, take this little ball and knock it in that hole. So I got in the golf cart and I drove down there. Dropped the ball in there and drove back and said, hole in one. The guy said, it's against the rules. As it turns out, when they invented golf, there were no golf carts, so it actually is not against the rules. They had to change the rules after that. Because there's a way around everything. He said, no. He said, the object is to get your body to move in a way. There's a concentration, and he said, you have to rotate your hips. And he kept showing me all this stuff. However, he didn't take into account that I was left-handed. So these clubs were not going to help me. The thing was not even facing in the right direction. And I tried to do it, but my first attempt to tee off, by the way, this is at one of the most exclusive and expensive golf courses in the world. And when that strip of grass flew up into the air, this Scotsman came out of nowhere from behind a tree, yelling and screaming obscenities I couldn't understand, and began to use the clubs for violent activities. And this part I enjoyed, I had to admit. He was trying to kill me, and I was blocking blows and fencing. I grew up in Chinatown in San Francisco. I did martial arts most of my entire life. I thought, this is really fun. And I told the guy, I said, I love this. I said, you just chop some grass, and a guy comes out and you fight with him. I said, this is great. This is much better than bowling. Although, when you go bowling, they bring you cocktails. That's my idea of a sport. I like that. A bar, and you get to play. It'd be nice if you were a football player, you're a quarterback, you go into the huddle and you went, cappuccino, please. And I'll take a shot of whiskey too, a Jameson's, please. You guys feeling a little more loose now? Ready, relaxed, not so much tension? For example, a lot of guys in the 60s used drugs as a way of, trying to get a date, and get girls to go home with them. And I would say, you try to use marijuana as a way to get a girl to go home with you, or worse, cocaine. They'd go home with you, but all night long. And they'd wake up in the morning, the sun would come through and burn their retinas out, and they'd go and do it again. But I tried to explain to them, if you're going to do something that's stupid, use ether. At least it'll work. To me, either that or go into the state that you want someone else to go into. See, for example, David, just imagine if I could take my attitude and stick it inside you for just an instant. Then when you thought about doing this, see how easy that was? Doesn't that feel good? See, I said, fuck this psychic phenomenon. You don't need the psychic hotline. You are the psychic hotline. When you have doubts about your client's ability to change, or doubts about making a sale, you make them not buy it. Me, blinders on. Learned it from my dog. Once that attitude's in there, now, David, think about the same thing. Can you make the bad feelings come back? Can't do it, can you? It just disappears. Now, it used to take me fucking weeks to do this, because I used to try and do it with words and explanations and hour-long hypnotic inductions. Now I realize the best induction of all is to show people biologically the strings in your brain, the neurocortical pathways are just like the piano strings. You line yours up and go, that's all it takes. Depressive comes in and I look at him and go, and they go, what? And I go, I go, well, how come you came in here? And they go, I don't know. Let's go out and do something. Last depressive I worked with, his father's a doctor and referred him to me. He said he'd been in to see psychiatrists since he was 12 because he just was depressed. He's been depressed his whole life. Him and saw me one time, took over his dad's company, turned it into something that instead of losing money, ended up doing $300 million a year, sold the 80% of the stock to some health company, and for enormous amount of money. Plus, they hired him for the next 5 years to open businesses like that all over the country and gave him 75% of each one. He's now like a trillionaire. And so he decided he didn't want to do this anymore, so he bought a movie company, right? This guy was a depressive. He couldn't get out of bed. And I went, "You can't get out of bed?" I said, "You have that much sex?" He goes, "Oh no, I don't have sex at all." I said, "Would you like to?" I said, "All you have to do is think about it differently." And he said, "Well," and I went, because inside my mind, you see, having gone to all these places, the psychologists, Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, wonderful woman. Milton Erickson, by the way, I didn't really like that well. He was a good hypnotist, but he was a feckin' idiot. I mean, that's all there was to it. 200 hours to put somebody in trance. I'm not that patient. I'll grab them by the carotid artery and knock them out faster than that. There had to be quicker ways. Plus, he believed the only cure for people was leave the hospital, get a job, get married, and send him presents. That doesn't seem like a wide range of choices. So what do you do with the bulimic that's not in a hospital? You go, okay, get a job and send me bags of vomit? I mean, that's why I couldn't work with bulimics. Bulimics, the people who are obsessed with food their entire fucking life. Last one I did took me 15 minutes. And for 3 months, she's had absolutely no problem whatsoever. You know why? Because I taught her the one thing that she hadn't thought about. Every day she thought about food. She was either anorexic or bulimic. Her whole life centered around avoiding food or eating food, binging, vomiting. It was in her weight, staring in the mirror, am I fat, am I too thin, am I this, am I that? And then she would finally go to a frenzy and she'd take enormous amounts of drugs and drink. So she had to join AA, the 13 steps that they can never remember because their memories are shot. They can always tell you the first 2 or 3, but they can never seem to recite them all. And they carry that little book around, which is this thick for 13 things. Somebody's a long-winded writer. I tell them, I like to glue all the pages closed in the book. I find that helpful for people who are alcoholics, because it's not having a fucking excuse to be an alcoholic. It's looking at booze and going, I can take it or leave it, and leaving it most of the time. That will help alcoholics. And bulimics, they need to be able to think about food and go, that's all. They need to, there's lots of things they can think about. You go, okay, let's talk about electric trains. And they go, electric trains? And I go, yeah. I said, if somebody offers you an electric train, do you go, oh, wow, I have to have it? Or I know I hate trains? And you go, I don't care about trains. Anchor it. And you take it and you spin that feeling round and round. And then you tell them, think about eclairs and desserts and steaks, And then thinking, oh, well, if you're too fat, what does that mean? I mean, what does it mean? Especially you're talking to somebody who's going to die. Their arms are this fucking skinny, They look in the mirror and go, I'm too fat, right? A bad decision. They need to, instead go, you need to put on a little weight. They go, but what if guys won't like me? They already don't like you. You're too skinny, right? As a matter of fact, if a guy doesn't like you because of your size, pick a new guy. That would be my suggestion. Because I got news for you. We're all going to get older. Some of us are going to age gracefully, and some of us, like me, aren't. There's no way I'm aging gracefully. I've done too many things in my life to age gracefully. I've got body parts made by every plastics company in the world. I get up in the morning, I have to glue my feet back on just to get them to work. So I had a doctor. I brought my wife to the hospital one time because she has a serious illness. And while I was in the emergency ward and they were giving her some treatment, the doctor looked at me and he goes, well, I want to tell you she's going to be okay. It's just another episode, but we caught it early enough. She's not going to have problems. But he said, you look like shit. Right? And I said, what's the problem? And he said, I don't know, can I take your blood pressure? And he put this thing on my arm and I said, what pressure would you like? And he went, good God. He said, your blood pressure is normal. And I said, yeah, can be. What were you hoping for? And he said, my wrist, and he put this thing on my finger, and he said, take your pulse. I said, what would you like, 60? And he went, yeah, right. You would never have a pulse of 60. He looked at the thing and it said 60. And I went, 93. And it said 93. And then I went, 12. That scared the crap out of him. When it stops dropping below 20, you're ready to go into coronary arrest. But I did yoga for 30 fucking years, man. I can go into a state where they can't even detect I'm alive, right? And still I don't die. Pisses them off, too. There's people all over the planet going, won't he just fucking die? And then we won't have to think about this stuff anymore. Comes into town all the time, comes into the hospital, and when they least expect it, that's when I show up. Because some relative will always hire me. There they are, doing whatever kind of thing, explaining to people about how they have to learn to live with their handicaps. Oops. I don't think so. They told my wife she'd never be able to walk again, ever. She was paralyzed from the neck down. And they said I would have to put her in an institution. And, and I looked at this guy and I said, would it be all right if I struck you as hard as I can? And he said, no. And I said, then I suggest you don't say things like that. I said, because I promised my wife she would walk again. And if you say that kind of hypnotic suggestion in front of her, I'm going to have to hurt you very badly. And he said, well, I'm sorry, my diagnosis is that. And I went and grabbed him by the throat and headbutted him, poof, like this. He stopped doing it after that. Especially since I didn't take my hand off his throat. I said, do not say things. I don't think it's a good idea to give people bad suggestions, especially yourself. You're going to tell yourself things, David? You need to have a voice that sounds like you mean it. In Mexico, there's a phrase called "Los grandes huevos." This means very large balls. And if you're going to function on this planet, whether you're a man or a woman, you need to have that attitude that goes with knowing that you can do things easy, you can do them a hard way, but you're never going to stop. You become relentless, ferocious. You say to yourself, well, yes, people say that you can't control your heart rate. That's bullshit. These yogas do it all the time. And they say, oh, it takes centuries to learn to do it. Well, do time distortion. Why not? Go in and practice 5 years, but do it in an hour. There's no reason why you can't. This weekend, you'll discover you have changed the way you feel about a lot of things. People are going to say stuff. Like you'll hear people, they go, oh, I never could be a happy person. And you'll start laughing. That should be your natural reaction. Demonstrate. Paranoid schizophrenics, I scare the piss out of them. Right? They're all trying to handle them with kid gloves. I knock on their door, lightly. You hear footsteps going back and forth. You go, scratch on the door. Finally, they'll open the door and they'll go, what? I go, and I get in and I go, they're after us. Bang, close the door. Look around like this and go, they're behind the curtains. And they'll rip the curtains back. And you go, under the bed. And they'll look under the bed. And you go, in the drawer. And in the drawer. And you go, under the matchbook. And they'll pick it up and you go, this is not going to be a person under a matchbook. And at the moment they feel like a total fucking idiot, you anchor it. And then you tell them, spin that feeling of stupidity enough that you feel like you don't want to do dumb things again. You want to do good things. Man, the best way to do it with your clients is to tell them the truth. Because there's always that point at which I look at them and I say, have you done this often enough, do you think? I had a guy who told me he was disappointed with life. And I said, cool. How do you know exactly when to be disappointed? He said, oh, I'm disappointed with everything. I said, so I'm a fucking disappointment, I am I? And he went, well, no, not you. And I went, okay, that's one thing. Think of another. And he went, well, I love my car. And I said, really? What kind of car is it? He goes, I designed it myself. And I said, I said, how about your socks? He goes, well, I'm very disappointed. I could never find socks that make me happy. I go through the store for hours trying to find perfect socks, and I never can. Life is disappointing. And I said, I got it in one nutshell. This guy doesn't know the difference between things you look for and things you design. You design a car, but building your own socks is just too much trouble. But guess what I know about his biggest problem is going to be? I said, you're probably single, huh? And he went, oh, yeah, I'm single. And I said, because when you meet a woman, she just won't act the way you want her to, will he? And he said, well, I have an idea of what the perfect woman would be. And I try to tell women to act that way, but they just won't do it. It's not how it works, guys. They have the pictures, we perform the behaviors. And if you don't enjoy it, you're just going to suffer your whole life. As soon as you accept it, life gets good. You learn the mantra. These guys do these mantras for years and years. I learned mine. Yes, dear. I practice at night. I go inside and meditate deeply, go, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. But you see, I think that's good. And as long as you feel good about it, what the fucking problem is there? It doesn't mean I do anything. I don't have good enough memory these days. What was I talking about? But then your memory has slipped more in this weekend than you could possibly imagine. I kept coming back to things, and you guys didn't even know we'd left. And suddenly you went, oh yeah, what about that? See, it sounds like my mind is all over the place, and it is. And I want your mind to be the same way, because if you start looking ahead and planning, you get a lot more than if you start thinking about the shit that happened to your life. You go, well, when I was 5 years old, I broke my foot. Let's think about that for an hour. I was in elementary school, I couldn't run as fast as other people. They called me a fat kid. Yeah, I'll think about that for hours. How in the fuck is that going to help you? Forget about that fucking crap. Start thinking about what you want your life to be like every fucking moment. You're going to light the candle, pull out into the fast lane, put the fun meter all the way down and make sparks off the guardrail? Or are you going to go back and go into your office and go, well, how was your week? And the person goes, well, I still didn't find anybody I could introduce myself to. I'm nervous. And then you're going to go, well, how do you feel about that? Or are you going to go, you fucking idiot? I go, let's go out and do it now. That's the way I do. I take them with me. Drag them out of the office, kicking and screaming. The elevator phobics, we're off to the elevator. We just sit in front of it and watch the doors open and close. And I go, pretty soon you're going to have to go in there. So you better fucking get rid of the fear now. Because when we get part of the way up, I'll press the fucking stop button and cut it off. You'll be in there forever. And then they'll have to take you out with some fucking thing up the tube. That'll be the worst nightmare of your fucking life. You might die today. If you try to leave the hotel, you'll be dead before you get a step. I go, wouldn't it be better to just be fucking tired of having this stupid fear and just look at yourself until you just look totally, you're afraid of it. Room doors. Excuse me. I put chocolate on chairs. Right. This woman who ate so much chocolate, she gave herself toxic poisoning. She had jaundice. Her doctor sent her to me and said this one is going to die if she doesn't stop. She was eating 4 to 5 pounds of chocolate a day. It's horrible. I mean, it's bad for your diet, but you can poison yourself with water by drinking too much of it. And she said, if I even think about chocolate, or I see an ad in a magazine, I have to eat chocolate. So I said, put this chocolate bar in front of her. And I said, look at the chocolate bar. And she started to get up, and I slapped her. I said, that's my chocolate bar. I've had it for 4 years. And just to make sure she doesn't eat it, I tell her, and I piss on it at least once a day. And re-wrap it back up. She still wanted to eat it. And I said, now, do you realize this thing has got more choice in its behavior than you do? I said, don't you feel like a stupid fucking idiot? You're willing to die for a pissed-on chocolate bar? Right? And she goes, well, I feel stupid. And I said, not stupid enough. Let's take that feeling and whirl it up till you feel like a fucking complete idiot. Till that thing kicks in and you go, no more. A lot more. A lot more choices. A lot more about how to look at it and go, take it or leave it. Some things you just have to take that way. Some things you have to just totally have an aversion to. See, in the Hebrew Bible, actually there were 15 commandments, not 10. The Christians lost 5 of them somewhere. They didn't like those ones. But that one about, shall not commit adultery. In ancient Hebrew, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery with thy neighbor's wife, because that's a bad idea. Thou shalt not commit adultery at work. Bad idea. But in those days, if you went down the roadways, that was okay. To me, that's not okay. When you make commitments, you should keep them for one reason. Because you made the commitment. And if you want to feel good, the easiest way to do it is to do the right thing for the right reason. Now, if you're not enjoying the relationships you're having, you have two choices. One is to end it, and the other is to change what you're doing. Because it will always change the other person. You see, and if you go into such a deep state of wanton pleasure that everything they do makes you happy, they can't stay in a bad mood. It's impossible. If I could just look at people and make them drop into a deep trance, imagine what happens if you go inside and click the hormones and the pheromones inside your brain and spray them at the person you're supposed to be in love with. They can't look at, it's because my wife will come in and she'll be upset about things. She goes, I couldn't find a place of parking, blah, 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 blah. And I look at her and go. She goes, don't look at me that way. And I go. She goes, oh, shit. She goes, I'm going in the other room. And I go. Because if you understand biology and you understand yogurt, then understanding people is easy. Now, what I would hope that you would get here, do you have your certificates? They give you your certificates? No, they didn't? Yes. Somebody here wasn't paying attention. But take out your certificate. If you don't have it, pretend like you have it. Take your certificate, place it on the top of your head like this. Point down, forward, in the front. Right. Remind you of anything? Now, repeat after me. I promise to take the skills I have learned here and to make my life a better place. And not to become a big dickhead like so many other people stuck at various levels of Richard's development. I christen you the class of 2003. Thank you. Ow! Now, I'd like to take a couple moments, and I'd like to thank a few people. I'd like to start, of course, with the people that assisted us here. Will you stand up, the people that work for Kate and for the Institute here in Ireland? Guys, stand up. Raise your hands up like this so they know who you are. And will my two co-teachers come up here, please? Owen. You don't need the microphones. You forgot the fucking chairs. That was the only instruction I gave you today. Sorry. I know, you fucked up. See? Positive reinforcement. Owen's been saying I'm sorry ever since he got here because I make sure if people make mistakes, they know about them. I point every detail out at things because I learned to do that in school. I went to school, because I went to college. I had 2 PhDs. And all they ever told me was everything I did that was wrong. They pointed out every word I misspelled. They don't put the mark next to the word you spell right. They circle the one you spell wrong. Constantly they do this to you. And I think the way to get better at things is to notice what works and to use it. For the rest of your life. Maybe the next one, too. Why stop once you're on a roll? Keep going. Now, we wanted to leave you with just one other thought. I also wanted to thank Kate. Kate did a great job of putting this together. And of course, my great sound guy for her. Because otherwise, of an event, about like many events, the years I've had community do things, and single most important thing that I can have mentioned to you. The other thing is we wanted to leave you with one last trance to do something different. So put your feet on the floor, take a deep breath, because I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see where you live and where you work. Because the ideas and the understandings
that can come through every single part of your body, just like you've heard them before.
You can begin just to unwind, to settle down, to relax into a comfortable sensation.
and look at where you live and realize the learnings and the understandings of the hotel here
and now
Dublin
can stay
will form the
for
foundation
the rest of your life.
You can begin
of doing new things in new
move
ways.
into a new
It's
full
not
system.
your conscious mind that we've been
It's so
speaking
easy.
to,
Deep inside
but
of
the
you,
unconscious portions of
you've
each
heard
of
everything.
both
make
of you.
these changes.
Once your
You've
conscious
heard
mind is
language.
overloaded, your unconscious
You
mind
experience
absorbs.
many
And
different
you've been
becomes
learning a lot
brighter,
and you can
that
find
will stay
out
with
happier,
you from
as
here
you look
to
into the
there,
future.
more
and
relaxed.
from now
There are
to then,
so many
focused.
things to
in the
look
future,
forward
in the
to.
night,
More
and in the
ease.
days,
So
and
many
weeks
feelings
ahead.
to
An
build.
Every
feelings.
time a bad feeling comes up, you
Just
have the
allow yourself
opportunity
exhilaration
to make
to
your
begin
life
to do
greater.
things differently.
Delight.
You have the chance to take that and go inside and
results
spin
that you're
good
looking
feelings
for.
up. When you're at home at night,
'Cause it's
review
so
your
easy.
day, find out where you need more strength
to
and better
feel how
beliefs,
much more
and build them
pleasure
up
for
so
no
you're ready to go
boundaries can you
forward
stand.
And just to
into the
feel
future.
good.
How good can
Your
you feel?
unconscious
in
can
and of
begin
itself.
today, tomorrow.
Changes.
It doesn't matter which,
I've already
as
been
long
made.
as for the rest of your life you
Build
make
new
changes
sensations.
which point out to you that there's still light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, there's still light all the way through. So open your eyes and go home. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Richard Bandler. Thanks, Larry.